Greetings and good Friday morning, this 31st of March, 2023, third decade of the 21st century. If you know me and you're not new to my channel, then you know that's what I'm about. If you don't know me and you're new to my channel, I always like to say that in the opening phrase because I think it's interesting that it is, in fact, the third decade of the 21st century, and people, great minds, had hypothesized and theorized where we would have evolved to as a culture, as a society, as a people. And I'm always fascinated at where we are presently. What are we actually talking about? What are the mainstream issues? With that in mind, the first half of this video, which will go on YouTube, is essentially, how do I put this, a culmination of this month. This month, going back to, at the very least, 2003, for some reason this month has had a weird and unique history with me. In fact, if I look back at my life, it might actually go as far back as 1999. Yeah. My awkward and unique history with this month might go all the way back to 1999. I believe in 1999, in March, is when I was disenrolled from the sergeant's course for the first time. It was my first time going through, which would eventually lead to my subsequent NJP in April of '99, where I would lose orders to embassy duty. I would be reduced in rank to corporal, and I would be put on 60 days restriction. But the events that led up to that, if I'm not mistaken, took place in March of '99. Fast forward to 2003, I participated in the invasion of Iraq with 2nd Platoon Golf Company, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, RCT 5, 1st Marine Division under General Mattis. I'd been in the Marine Corps for 8 years and at least a month when we crossed the border beginning the invasion. And it's hard to believe that that is now 20 years ago. 8 years ago, my firstborn son, Logan, would inevitably lose his battle with the results of his illness. For anybody that's not tracking, for anybody that's new, my son and I shared a disease called Hirschsprung's disease. Essentially, it affects the ganglion nerve development inside the intestinal tract, which is what allows digestive material to make its way through the intestines down to the sphincter and the anus, where it could be expelled. What Hirschsprung's disease does is it essentially attacks the fetus and prevents the growth of ganglion nerve cells so that you don't have what's known as motility. My son would end up getting a transplant, two actually. The first one failed, the second one took. Unfortunately, the donor had an undiscovered condition that would eventually lead to post-transplant lymphoma, and ultimately enough complications where my son would eventually pass away March 7th of 2015. I was a civilian for all of 7 days. Last year, on the 19th of March, my mother would eventually pass away. She would eventually succumb to her demons. My sister believes that she found evidence that my mom's cancer had come back much sooner than we were aware of, and that my mother was potentially aware of it, and basically chose to live her life on her terms regardless of what anybody else thought or felt about it. So the month of March, you know, while I may not have been on my channel that much, has kind of been a unique month. and ultimately why I haven't been on here that much, because I just, as life is, you deal with it from time to time. With that being said, I posted a video recently, and the one viewer of mine that does take the time to respond, Stace Catalan, responded with, this topic is too sensitive, or the video or the topic is too sensitive for me to respond to right now. Stace, admittedly, just out of pure, genuine curiosity, I'm interested in what in particular was sensitive. Was it the last topic pertaining to the Nashville shooting, or was it all the topics in general? If it was the last topic that the video more or less closed on, I understand. If it was any other topics, I'd be interested at what those would be sensitive about. But admittedly, it's your choice and your decision, and I respect it and I'll let it go. Just my natural inquisitive nature is curious, that's all. And hopefully you can respect that I'm just naturally curious, but I'm not going to push you. And I think that's something that's fair and unique about our modern society, where we feel the need to push and push, where we don't like to respect boundaries anymore. I find that interesting. And it may seem oxymoronic that somebody who spent 20 years of their life in the military dedicating themselves to mastering the art of maiming and destroying the human condition, that the main focus of my channel is peace and unity. But it is, because whether conspiracies have a foundation of truth, whether conspiracies exist for a reason, not to put my tinfoil hat on, but I believe that there are forces, there are elements that would prefer to see our country divided, that they would like to see perhaps some sort of civil conflict, God forbid another civil war, because these people are, if they do exist, if the conspiracy is real, they are very smart, they're well educated, they're well funded, and they're more than likely scholars of history. If history has taught us nothing, is that empires fall. Now, I'm not saying that the United States is an empire, but if you look at the history of mankind, large civilizations that eventually grew to a certain point of stature, success, and whatnot, have eventually fallen. In the most recent history, if we look at the former Soviet Union and what became of it in the late 80s, early 90s, if we look at former Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia area, where it's more or less splintered into the Czech Republic, I think Albania, Macedonia, perhaps a bunch of other regions, there is truth in that entities do eventually rise and fall, and I do believe that there are groups, people, forces, whatever label you want to use, that have a dedicated interest in seeing our country as it is essentially fail. It seems like no matter where you turn in the third decade of the 21st century, you have one group constantly just, and within that one group you have multiple groups, all right? And basically the general theme, the general consensus is white people bad. And then if you dissect it a little bit further, straight white males bad, evil. You look at some of the victims, the victim celebration, the stuff going on within the Native American community or indigenous peoples or whatever. I mean, for crying out loud, the Washington Redskins are now the Washington Commanders after, I think, one full season of not even having a name. What else? I think the Cleveland Indians are attempting to rebrand themselves. And then within the black community, or African American, which I have some issues with, because technically speaking, Africa is a continent, and it may be made up of a mixed ethnicity of people, all right? In which case, you look at Elon Musk and you look at Charlize Theron, they are technically African. and if they've gotten their citizenship here, that would also make them African American. But that's not what we mean when we say African American. We're specifically referring to a very unique and specific appearance, also known as black. And you look at what's going on in some of the larger black communities. The whole thing with Stop Asian Hate. Has anybody ever stopped to ask where the majority of Asian hate is coming from? The anti-Semitism stuff. Has anybody ever stopped to question where the majority of anti-Semitism is coming from? I just look at the simple fact that it's the third decade of the 21st century, and it's as though people are trying to take us all the way back to the 1960s and what it was like in the former Confederate South in the 1960s, 50s, 40s, and earlier. And that they're trying to basically rebrand the country as being as bad or worse as 1960s and earlier southern former Confederate United States. And I don't believe that to be true, which is one of the big reasons for my channel. Was, you know, within certain communities there's a certain expectation of conduct and how one must present and conduct themselves, where if they don't, then they lose their ethnicity card, so to speak. Or there are people that may not be 100% in line with one group, like say Republican or Democrat, and find themselves more in the middle. And that was more or less what my channel was meant to kind of do, was, you know, help bridge the gap. And I know more popular channels like, say, you know, the Daily Wire, The Blaze, and everything they've got going on over there with Candace and Ben and Chad and all these other big names, and then Steven Crowder and Tim Pool and Patrick Bet-David. You know, the majority of us are not on that level, and a lot of us cannot afford to, you know, pay to go beyond the paywall where we can get recognized and participate in the conversation. And that was part of the reason I started my channel. Admittedly, when I say in previous videos that I was somewhat surprised, almost pleasantly, at the lack of popularity, I've been recently putting my old catalog on Rumble, and I made one video specifically about Jensen Ackles and Joss Whedon, where the video itself has gotten over 1,000 views. I mistakenly hypothesized that every video I made would, at a bare minimum, get 1,000 views, which in the YouTube world, 1,000 views is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. I mean, some of the people I pay attention to, like Razor Fist, Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, Sydney Watson, the likes. I mean, these are people that have tens of thousands to millions of views and followers and whatnot, and their channels are monetized. There's commercials. They get paid to do this. I don't. And ideally, what I meant to do was, for those of us that are on the lower end of the spectrum, like myself, like Stace, is provide us an opportunity to communicate where, you know, even though these bigger names, leave a comment, tell us what you think. I've done it, and nobody's ever acknowledged me. And it's not a matter of hubris. It's not a matter of ego. It was simply like, hey, you know what? There's got to be a space for us smaller people, us lesser people, us people of lesser means who can't necessarily afford to join Mug Club, or, you know, afford to pay for these super chats or whatnot. You know, some of us, we have bills to pay, we have jobs to go to, we so on and so forth, you know, where our money's accounted for. Some of us have kids that are getting ready to graduate high school and, you know, potentially go on to college, where I'm looking to assist in that endeavor, where, yeah, I can't necessarily, you know, afford to go beyond the paywall, where perhaps maybe my comments would be recognized. And it's not, this is not meant to be a ding or any kind of an insult towards these larger channels. The whole point was, you know, if you're kind of like me, you know, meager means, but you want to talk to somebody, you want to, you know, have these conversations about some of these awkward topics and issues, or let's not forget my channel is also somewhat dedicated to nerdy and geeky stuff, where I'm more than happy to geek out on stuff. And you know, very similar to Tim Pool has this thing, not Culture Wars, but basically they geek out on certain stuff and even discuss some of the socio-political ramifications. I apologize, it's not coming to me, but you know, I'm more than happy to do that as well. You know, case in point, just watched the most recent episode of The Mandalorian, and we've also been rewatching True Blood. And I may disagree sincerely with Pedro Pascal's personal politics and how he reacted and responded to the whole Gina Carano firing, but I really do enjoy The Mandalorian. I may disagree with Jon Favreau and some of his political views, who is largely responsible for The Mandalorian and whatnot, but I really enjoy it. And you know, I think, you know, you have really got to be married to your politics to not enjoy something like that because of the way some people feel. And that's kind of the bigger point, is we can think and feel differently and yet recognize the humanity in one another and be civil. You know, and maybe there are some issues where we need to have some discussions, and maybe there are some issues that there is no discussion. And that's where I'm going to end for today and have a secondary video specifically for Rumble attached to this. So very much in the ilk of Steven Crowder, I'm going to end this video for YouTube only, and then I'll have a secondary video combined into one that I'm going to post on Rumble, where it's a bit more safe. And to be quite honest, Stace, if you do watch this, the video I'm going to post on Rumble is probably gonna delve into some of the stuff that you might find sensitive. So for that instance, I'll just say you might not want to migrate over to Rumble and watch it. Keep in mind, I'm not doing this on purpose to offend you. I'm not doing this to trigger you. It's just, there's a topic that I want to discuss freely without any reservations, and I'm going to do it on Rumble. So with that being said, everybody, here's the deal. I don't care about the likes, the dislikes, the subscriptions, the notification bells. I'm not in it for monetization. I'm just in it to have conversations. So if you do take the time to leave a comment, I will read, react, and respond. And more importantly, if you do, I appreciate it. You're awesome. Be safe out there. Till next time.